Hello, everyone. My name is Perry Slade, and I am speaking to you from my home studio in Aurora, Illinois. And I want to say thank you for joining me today. I wanted to give you a little bit of background on my history, if you will, relative to art, and specifically photography. I do describe myself as a image maker on the one hand and a photographer on the other. And as I talk a little bit more about this, maybe that will be fleshed out a little more as to exactly what I mean by that. But going back to when it all began from an artistic standpoint, I was born in North Carolina, so that's what was my starting point. And my folks actually migrated to Newark, New Jersey, which is the northeastern part of the U.S. That's where I was raised, in fact. I've always, from a very early childhood, had a proclivity for drawing. And, I remember back, 5 and 6 years old, I spent an awful lot of time doing that. Simply just, drawing on pencil and paper, just like many kids always have and continue to do so today, essentially describing the world as I saw it. And in many ways, what I see myself doing today is really very similar to what I was doing when I was 5 and 6, creating images, simply, drawing, pencil, crayon, that type thing, either at home or in school. And I'm basically, creating or telling a story about the world as I see it. And when I'm done with it, I hold it up, right, to my parents and the teacher and say, look what I've done. Look how I see the world. And in many ways, I see myself in a very simple way doing the very same thing today. I look at the world and I create images. My tool of choice is a camera, i.e. photography. And when I'm done with it, when I am satisfied with the view that I have, the end result, I'm essentially holding it up to the world, right? And saying, hey, look what I did. Just like when I was 5 and 6, just like many kids do today. So in many ways, I'm doing the very same thing. My career relative to art and photography is one that has been ongoing over the years. I mean, as I indicated, I began as a child drawing, and any endeavor that I had, as I was growing and maturing, working at various companies, many of which had nothing to do with art whatsoever. I've always, in the course of my life, have been interested in creating images, in telling stories. So all my entire work life, which actually ended with a retirement several years ago, has now given me the time to 100% work towards my creative efforts in photography. Along the way, I've had the opportunity to exhibit many times locally here in the quote unquote Aurora area, commonly known as the Fox Valley area. So I've had a number of different venues in which I've held it up like I did when I was 5 and 6 and say, hey, look what I did, presenting the work at galleries and so forth. But I've always continued and knew that even when I ultimately retired, that I would do a deeper dive into this storytelling, creating images through photography and through art. So it's really a slow migration, from early childhood up until my mid-teens, in which I predominantly spent my time painting and drawing, but again, still, on the 2D image level. Until my mid-20s approximately, I discovered a camera. And I quickly determined that I had discovered a tool that could help me along this creative journey. And I've used this tool ever since. I began with a mechanical camera, again, when I was in my mid-20s, mostly black and white, processed the film myself, and have slowly graduated until now, in which I am using a digital camera to create images, basically to tell stories. So my life is centered around that at this point, and I think just generally speaking, that's kind of what brought me to this point. I think the term for it is autodidactic, right? I am self-taught. So, you know, I've learned through doing, number one, you know, doing the work, you know, taking the images and being creative, but also studying photographers that have come before. Not only photographers, but artists. So anyone that was involved in creating 2D images, I tended to study and follow. You know, visiting museums, reading about various photographers, learning about and looking at their particular styles, from photojournalism to you know, artists like Annie Leibovitz, for example, who's just very, very, very creative, right? In the way that she creates images. She tells great stories, and she, you know, my word, don't put words in her mouth, but, you know, she stages and creates, you know, the image in a very specific kind of way, right? And I like doing that also. You know, my work is very eclectic. It is mostly black and white in the way I present it to the world, but not always. Black and white doesn't always convey the story that I want to tell. And if I can tell it better in color, I certainly do so and make that choice. And you could see, you know, at my website, for example, a great variety of work that is either black and white or color. I typically use, as I mentioned, I use a digital camera. So my end result, my images are processed digitally using software like Adobe or Lightroom, or in combination. Typically, what you will see in my images are going to be fairly raw. That is to say, I'm not adding items to it, nor am I pulling items out of it the way you can with Photoshop. I am simply using it in the way you traditionally would, you know, want to develop, if you will, except that I'm doing it digitally. So although some of the work that you see that I do is quote unquote staged, you know, created by me, it is in fact from the real world. You know, it is something that I've probably done in my studio, and that's where the images actually created in that manner.
So I noticed that you, for example, would go into a tailor shop and take a picture, and then you go on a bridge and take a picture, and then you would go on, you know, under an overpass and take a picture of two women walking down the street.
Mm-hmm.
So you really like to capture um, moments, take people, you know, unexpectedly. So we see the world exactly the way it is at that moment.
That's exactly right. That's it is. If we were to take a step back for a moment, Leanna, you had mentioned the you know, going into a tailor shop, for example, and I think that's probably in reference to the one that I have that's called Tailor's Dream. That image, in fact, was one that was created by me in total. The way it came about was I was actually working in my home studio, and as I was finishing up for the day, I turned the lights out. Well, I had forgotten to turn one light out back in the far corner of the studio, and as I turned around to go back to turn the light out, I happened to see this combination of pieces that were there. This mannequin with the material draped over the shoulder, and the more I looked at it, the more I began to kind of, you know, ask myself, well, what is it I'm looking at? Because I do get fascinated sometimes, and I don't clearly see what it is has caught my attention. That's not always the case, but this was one of the cases where that did happen. And the more I looked at it, the more I envisioned in my third eye, if you will, this this vision that you might see if you were to walk into a tailor shop. So what you see, all the elements, the mannequin, the thread, all that's being suspended, that is all a function and grew out of a vision that I had, and one that I actually created in the studio and then photographed
Have
it.
the chance to go back to North Carolina and take some pictures
Well,
there?
no, not particularly. I haven't gone back to North Carolina. I was born in Greensboro, North Carolina, and I was there for all of 6 months. I mean, really as a baby. And then my folks, as I mentioned earlier, migrated to Newark, New Jersey. You know, my father wanted to go to Pittsburgh, Pennsylvania, because he was working in the steel industry. And, you know, they knew that they, being my father and mother, knew that they wanted to migrate, to leave North Carolina, to go north, to get a better life, get better jobs, etc. My father wanted to go to Pennsylvania. Now, my mother, on the other hand, suggested that they go to Newark, New Jersey, right? Well, why Newark, New Jersey? Well, that's because my mother had 3 sisters that already lived in Newark, New Jersey, right? And so, you know, after I'm sure some discussion between her and my father, ultimately the short version is I wound up being raised in Newark, New Jersey. So that's really how that happened. But I spent a very little time in Greensboro, North Carolina. But Leanna, to your point, I think it's probably worth mentioning that I do photograph wherever I happen to be. I worked, for example, in what's called the relocation business. Had absolutely nothing to do with photography, but it was a job that took me to many places, all within the U.S. There was no international travel involved, but anywhere that I was, obviously I was there for business first. That was the reason that I was in a particular location. Whether it was San Diego, California, or Jacksonville, Florida, or wherever it happened to be, I was there on business. But there are moments, though, you know, when you get up in the morning and you walk out on the balcony, getting ready for a meeting, and you see something. So I've always kept my my attention for stories, for images that I saw, really no matter where I was. So, you know, I do as I travel, wherever I happen to see the story that's interests me, either I see it clearly or whether there's something in my gut that says there's something there, I take the photo. So it's really, you know, the work is pretty eclectic. I think a lot of it has to do with the fact that, you know, I'm open all the time. I shoot, for example, to the point, I have images of what I call urban scapes, right? There are photos that are taken in industrial areas, in cities, looking at how buildings are juxtaposed against each other, looking at the graphic elements. But I'm just as easy taking a photograph out at a park or in the country. If I see something in nature or some composed image that kind of just strikes me, right? That sort of speaks to me, I will take the image. So I don't restrict myself in that way. So it kind of goes back to what we were talking about earlier. You know, when I say that my work is eclectic, it is literally the case, whether it's an urban scape or whether it's a landscape or whether I see something, a story like I did in my studio with Taylor's Dream, where I want to create the image, right? Looking for some end result. It really doesn't matter to me that much about where I happen to be. To me, what matters is what has my attention at that particular time. So whether I'm traveling or not, or, you know, in my basement, in the studio, in the house, walk outside the door, in my backyard, I'm always open to the story, and I'm always open because I'm first interested in what I'm seeing and what I'm feeling. But you know, as I kind of inferred earlier, right? I want my art to be seen beyond just, you know, just my appreciation of it. I'm really interested in exhibiting the work and sharing it with people. In many ways, I'm trying to connect with other individuals. You know, do you see the same thing that I am seeing in the world, right? And that kind of thing restores me to a large degree. I get a lot of satisfaction out of that. So I'm not interested in taking the photo and just, you know, putting it away and moving on to the next project. I'm interested in telling a story, identifying with it, and then sharing with others, and get a lot of satisfaction out of the feedback that I get from folks. And sometimes, you know, you get feedback, you know, not just me, but any artist, anyone that's writing or painting or in photography. You know, what you're bringing is your perspective to it, but the fact of the matter is, when you're showing it and presenting it to other people, they are bringing their experiences to it. And sometimes it's really interesting to hear the response or the reaction that people are getting to the work that may be different than what you had in mind to begin with. And I always find that really, really interesting.
I looked at your website and I saw that you took many photos at jazz events, jazz performers.
Those photos, Leanna, are photos that were taken at an event that's called Jazz O, in which there is an artist that is painting while those musicians are playing. So it was one of those opportunities that I had on several different occasions, because those they're called jazz occurrence events, put on by an artist by the name of Lou Arkenbach. And he paints, and the artists come in and they play, and he paints in response to what they're playing. So I say all that to say that those particular photos are taken at that particular kind of an event. I mean, as opposed to being a musician photographer, not quite that far. That happened to be an opportunity in which I could take photographs, and of course I was very interested in photographing those kinds of artists, right? Their movements, the stories that they're telling with their instruments. So it was another opportunity to tell a story, as far as I was concerned. But that's what those Jazz O events are all about.
You go around with your camera pretty much everywhere.
Yeah, I have my camera with me all the time, and again, I'm always open for opportunities whenever I see them. There is a project an ongoing project that I'm working on right now. It's a little bit, I think it's kind of in the wheelhouse of your question, Leanne, I think, but it's what I'm referring to is that I have a series of images that are not, I think, do not fall into what you might traditionally call the photographic bucket. In fact, the exhibit is on display currently at the main library in downtown Aurora, and at a couple of their satellite locations. And the name of it is called the Artist Conversion of Found Communications Within the Environment. So basically what I've done as a result, I mean, I'm carrying my camera around with me all the time, and I happen to be looking down at an image of some graphic nature of white paint against the gravel on a road. And that's led me to this creation of a series of images under that particular title, which is, you know, not quite inside the traditional bucket. So you know, again, it kind of goes back to the openness that I have. But yes, I've got my camera with me all the time, and it just sort of demonstrates that I'm open to many aspects of the image, right? If I think it tells a story. So yeah, that particular project is a rather interesting one, though. And I do have a couple examples from it on my website. All the pieces of, for example, I've got currently 31 pieces in total in that series of pieces, and they all have the exact same name: Artist Conversion of Found Communication Within the Environment. The only difference between them is that I add a 4-digit number at the end that simply serves the purpose of differentiating between the other, to be able to identify which ones we're talking about. The number in itself has no significance. There's nothing, relative to limited edition that the number implies, that type thing. It's simply a way to segregate one piece from another, but they all have the exact same title, because as far as I'm concerned, they're all telling the exact same story in slightly different ways. And really what it is there are many layers to this exhibit, but just to kind of give you an idea as to really what I'm doing, I'm taking the written language today that I see underfoot that most people tend to ignore. I'm turning it into a artistic piece, but it comes from the conversion of how those particular letter images began as the written word in a different form. So, and I'm clearly, I am not a linguist, but at in man's early creation of language, written language, began with pictures, so that the characters that we see written today, the A's and the B's, right, in the Greek language, didn't always look like that. And what they really are a manifestation of something that may have began as a picture of a bundle of straw, right, a way for a man to communicate early on. And those pictures that were being used to communicate, right, abstract ideas from one person to another have morphed and migrated and changed. Whether it's English or whether it's Chinese, they all began the same way. So all the letters that we see in the alphabet, whether it's English or whether it's Chinese or whether it's Russian, they all began as pictorial images many years ago. And in some ways, I've actually just sort of taken a conversion step and come full circle and taken them back to this pictorial aspect. So, and there's some other elements associated with it, but probably more time it would take than maybe what we have here. So,
what I noticed is that you are fascinated or very interested in capturing imperfections. That's not really perfect. It's you're seeing this bridge, you're seeing this bike, and then you give your own dimension, your artistic touch.
That's exactly right, and really, there's no way to avoid it. I'm not creating images for the purpose of other people to see them. I think that's kind of one point of what we're talking about. I am first creating them based on how they resonate, how I see them, whether it's meaningful to me or not. When I look at the picture of a bridge, of this particular bridge, for example, the one that we're referring to, I'm looking at trying to tell a story from a certain kind of perspective, right? And what kind of where do I stand? Where do I sit? What are the shadows? What are the lighting like? And what sort of a story am I saying? And sometimes, there's many stories there, but I am grabbing the one that I am particularly interested in. The one of the bike, for example, Leanna, in that particular image, which is one that again was created in my studio, it is really a concept. I've really tried to photograph a concept, an idea, right? Really, as opposed to the image itself. And see if I can try and explain that. In my mind, what you have in that photograph is basically two primary elements. You have a mode of transportation, right, which is the bike, right? The other element that you see with the bike is paraphernalia or gear that is used in it's Western in nature. It is the kind of gear that a cowboy, quote unquote, cowboy would use in terms of the whip, the spurs. I've taken this idea about the Western dress and I've combined it with the bike, right? And I call it American steed. So it's my way of referencing a modern tool like the bike in combination with this historical Western gear, right, that is used where you might have, obviously the Western gear is associated with a mode of transportation, which would be a horse, right, the pachyderm. I've just replaced the horse with a bike. And that's really what that image is. So I'm really creating an idea, a combination of old and new, horse versus bike, or bike versus horse, you know, saddled with or dressed up with a traditional historical outfit associated with an earlier time with the West, and that's why I call it quote unquote American steed.
Images, even though they show clear objects or people or, you know, the bridge or the door with the ivy, they are in fact abstract images that are tending to almost become a new alphabet. Each image stands for something that in your mind is very specific, has a specific meaning.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, that's very true, and I don't mind sharing that specific meaning when I create the image. Again, if you look at the image, I will typically attach the name, a name to it, the one we were just talking about of the bike and the Western gear, American steed. That's what's in my mind. That is what it is. That's what's driving the image in my mind. When you look at the one that you were just referencing, Leanna, the I Have a Story, which is what it's called. It is the door that is draped in ivy. And when I took that photograph, I was thinking about the life that had to exist behind that door. So, you know, I'm really trying to capture the exterior, separating it from what's happening in the interior, which is obviously the case that we're all familiar with. That's what, you know, doors do, kind of separate us one outside from the interior or from one side from the other. And you know that from where you're standing on one side of the door, there is always another story on this other side of that door. So, you know, so my idea was to kind of convey the door, right, speaking to you, the interior of the building speaking to you, saying I have a story, right? In a way, it's almost the idea is to invite you into it, right? Obviously, you can't do that, but that's really what's happening, right? I'm telling you what's happening, and there's an invitation. And you know, I've had a lot of people that really like that image, right? And I think they, you know, because of that commonality that we have, how we are associated with doors and homes and one side versus the other side, it seems to have struck a chord with many people in much the same way it did with me.
What about that image with a triangle and 24?
Yeah, so that piece is a piece that's from the exhibit that I was referencing earlier. It is from the artist conversion of found communication within the environment, and the number on that one is 1483. That is from that particular series. And what those are, you know, if you, as we're moving around in the world, and we're bombarded all the time with all kinds of language, either, you know, it's signs for the most part, you know, go here, don't do this, buy that, you know, don't buy this. You know, we got signs that are giving us guidance from the minute that we walk outside the door. It's coming from everywhere. And I happen to, and I noticed these communications that were taking place, that were underneath the feet. That kind of goes back to how I became interested in looking down, you know, if you will, as I did when I was looking at that stripe that I was describing of the paint against the gravel in the road. So as I look down, right, as I like everyone else, are being bombarded with all these messages that are coming in, and the signs and stores and all that stuff, I'm looking down and I'm saying, what is that I'm looking at? And I'm looking at the symbols that have been written in the street for work that is about to be done. So you've got engineers and technicians that are writing messages and codes to each other. It's a language that we don't understand, nor is it designed for us to understand. It's designed for those who are in the industry to really get. So I became interested in looking at more of these writings, these symbols. For me, some of them have a very specific character to them. You know, when I think about this particular series that we're referencing, that piece referencing now, it's I'm thinking about all the people that were involved in that. I didn't create those pieces. I didn't draw the triangle. I didn't write the number 24. That was found, as the name would imply, right? That is part of the found communication within the environment. Environment is the world we're driving our cars and walking as we go across the crosswalk, and those symbols are there. We ignore them because they're not for us. But they're written by individuals, and some of them, in my view, have a couple of different characteristics about them. Some of them are written in a way in which I think about calligraphy, right? The deliberate writing of letters and characters in a very specific and artful way, right? And I see some of these that are written that look to me like whoever wrote them with more care than just the utility of writing a message from one engineer to another engineer, construction worker to another construction worker, that they took some pride in the way they were writing it, took some pride in the way they actually built the message on the road. So that picture of the triangle and the 24 is representative of those kinds of images that we all see every single day. And some of them, not all, I'm interested in because I could see some ability to pull an artistic image out of it, right? To capture not only the fact that it is a representative of a pictorial image from long ago, it is also representing the personality or the character of those people that have written them. I refer, this is a little bit off mark, but it's still in regards to the series. I refer to unintended partners in this particular series of pieces, because as I mentioned, I don't write them, I don't draw them. I simply capture them, if you will. I capture them. And I may orient them differently from the way they are written, right? Depending on my sensibility, right? Because I'm really converting it into an artistic image. But those images are written by other people, right? And it's a series of pieces, and that particular piece is really a combination of not only an artistic effort, but also the efforts of a real endeavor that's taking place in the world by other people, quote unquote, as I refer to them as unintended partners. Recently, that very same exhibit was exhibited at the Fermilab online art gallery, and one of the things that came out of the exhibition at Fermilab was the recognition of those unintended partners having been involved in what we call, I guess, the science, technology, engineering, art, and math endeavors, right? STEAM. So Fermilab had a really strong interest in that particular aspect of those people, of that unintended partnership, and all the elements that had to go into the creation of that piece, right? Which I thought was really interesting. So there's a number of different levels associated with that, triangle in the 24. It is simply a representation of a capture. To me, no different than if I saw something in the world, whether it's a tree or a landscape or a cropping of a rock, right? I'm looking at the way it exists in the world, and then I'm cropping it and framing it in a certain way. For me, and to a large extent, it has that element about it. If that makes some sense.
Also, your image, civilization, it brings so close, right in our face, machinery, which has become such intrinsic part of our lives.
Yes.
It's so invasive. Was that your intent, to show how invasive it is?
Well, the intent was to bring it up close. To be invasive is a good way to describe it. In the background, you see the buildings, right, that are being brought down, right, that are being changed, and that's happening as a result of civilization, quote unquote civilization taking place. And I wanted to try and combine the machinery that was being used to alter, right, the civilization, the buildings, and juxtapose that against the elements of the buildings being torn down. But on the other hand, what I saw in that particular image was a combination of graphics and form. And to really convey that, you have to really get up close. You couldn't do that. I couldn't tell that kind of story from a distance. So it was quite intentionally to photograph it in the way that I did, to crop it in the way that I did, because I really wanted to not only tell the story of how I think that relates to civilization, but also do it in a very stark kind of graphic way. That's why you see it's a very high contrast image, right? Light and dark, and that was completely intentional. So between the combination of those things, getting it really close, to really emphasize to whoever was looking at it, all those elements was yes, indeed, purposeful, to invade. That's a good word. I hadn't thought about that before. I hadn't used that word, but that does describe it. Yes, that's what it's doing.
What are you working on right now?
So right now I'm continuing to work on that particular series, and right now I am working on, I'm sorry, that series being the one that we've been talking about. So I got a little shorthanded with that, but on the series we've been talking about, the artist's conversion to found communication within the environment, right? I've got that one is up now. What I'm doing now is taking some existing pieces that I have and adjusting the size on them, making them larger. So I am, to answer your question, I'm continuing to keep my camera with me and capture items, and I'm also working to see how I can through size present some of the other pieces that I have. So yeah, probably the most dynamic one is the conversion. I mean, the artist conversion that we've been talking about. Other than that, Leanna, it's just a continuation of visiting the world and capturing images and presenting them. So what I do is I capture them, present them, put them on my website. They are sold in a couple of different locations. So I'm working on telling more stories is what I'm working on.
You have come a long way from the moment you picked up your first camera to now when you are presenting in, let's say, Fermilab. You are recognized as a dedicated, even though you're self-taught, you are a professional, an artist, photographer.
Mhm.
How do you see yourself evolving in the next few years?
Oh, that's a great question. I've had a couple of conversations recently in which with other artists, for example, in which they are talking about this really old and continuing idea of finding one's voice, right? To be able to, and we'll take photographers, right, specifically, who are looking to figure out what their voice is. What is their message through their particular their work. When they make when they create an image, the idea is to for it to be easily recognizable, to be associated with that individual, let's say photographer in this case. My approach to that is different in this regard. And I'll try and answer your question about how I see things as I progress. I think that I've already found my voice in this manner. I think that it, whatever image or whatever story I happen to be trying to tell is really a result of a voice that is speaking to me, that is innate in how I tend to look at things, and how I tend to recognize them. And beyond that, you have the conscious decision as to whether you're going to capture it or not, or just how you're going to do it. In my case, with a camera, whether I will or will not take the photo. So there are many voices. I've got so many voices, whether it's I'm not focused on just landscapes. There are many photographers that are. Their voice is they take landscape photography. That's their voice. I'm not in that bucket. My bucket is to continue to be open, continue to look for stories, and to continue to hold my hand up after I created them to the world and say, hey, look what I did, right? Doesn't that resonate with you? So I say all that to say that my plan is pretty simple. I continue to work on my the current series that we've been discussing. I continue to open my mind to receive images and to continue to create them as long as I possibly can. So my only goal at this point is to do the work and to share it, and continue to have it resonate with people, and as a result of that, continue to restore me, right? And I use that word literally. I am restored by it. So as long as that's happening, I will continue to move forward in that direction. So those are my immediate plans. Do the work, as they say. Just do the work.
Where do you find your strength?
Oh, interesting question. I think I find it in the real need to connect with people. There is that, as I mentioned earlier. There are really two aspects. One is you've got the artist, you've got myself. That's actually, I'm creating the work. And in that process of holding it up to the world and say, hey, look what I did, what that's really doing is looking for that acknowledgement that what you are seeing is recognized, right, by humanity, right? Am I seeing something that resonates with people? Do they get it? So the strength that I get to continue to do it is the fact that I have the energy and the drive to tell stories. My way of telling a story, as opposed to a writer or a painter, is to do it through photography. So I know that that's how I can do it. So that's the method that I choose, and present that to the world, and connect with humanity. That's where I get my strength from. Because there's so much satisfaction that comes back from doing that, particularly when it's recognized. If you have the opportunity to exhibit the work, if you get feedback from people, if they say, yes, I get that, yeah, and let's talk about it, about what are the manifestations, right? Because each one of those photographs that I try and take, there are many stories that typically get embedded in it. Some of it, you can see quickly, and others you don't. And it goes back to what we were saying earlier about the value that people, right? That humanity, the people's humanity brings to it, their experience and so forth. So as long as I'm able to get that, as long as I'm able to have that feedback, quite frankly, that's where my strength comes from. Back to that word restoration, right? So whatever weakness or that is developed, I am restored. What's being restored? Energy, right? Drive. But to your point, where does the energy, the strength comes from? That's what it comes from. That connection with humanity, and being able to do it. I mean, there's a great satisfaction in knowing that you have a way of communicating and connecting with others. I mean, there's many ways to do it, obviously, right? Mine happens to be a visual, because I am a highly visual, animal or person. There are people that are verbal. I am, I gravitate towards the image, because I know how to, let's say, accept the sensitivity that I have when I see something. I think that's what it's about, right? I really accept. I'm always looking for one thing, right? And the other one is having the ability to accept what you're seeing as having some value, right? As opposed to, oftentimes I'm not seeing anything different than other people are seeing, quite frankly. It's just a matter of whether I stop, whether they stop, and recognize it. I simply recognize it. I stop, right? To see what it is I'm actually looking at. But it's the same thing, same physical world that everybody else is moving around in. I just have the sensitivity to approach it in a different way. So, a long-winded way of saying that's where I get my strength from, right? That's where my hope and my continuation is driven by that.
You sent me a photo of yourself.
Mm.
You took that photo?
I did. Yeah, I did. There was a couple of photos, and I took that photo. There's there were two, if I recall. One's a color, the other one is a black and white version. Well, not a version, but a black and white photo. But to answer your question, the short answer is yes, I took them both. In fact, I do portraits. I mean, that's part of my eclectic, endeavor, right? There's, in doing portraits, there is a commercial, right? A business side associated with that. There's an artistic one, but that kind of, as far as I'm concerned, kind of moves into the, the business side of it. But I do take portraits. I don't have them posted on my website because they are. I don't think it'd be appropriate necessarily, but there are a number of portraits that I've taken. So I continue to do not only this, what you would describe, and it's good that you bring this up, right? That I'm not only doing, because I hadn't considered talking about it before, but I'm not only doing just the fine art piece of it, but there is this commercial aspect of it. So, I'm doing portraits, headshots, for example, for people. I do commercial events. I'm not a wedding photographer, but just about everything else. If there's a business meeting, so I do that type work also. I do that type work also. The predominance of what I do is the fine art side of it, but I have a foot or two inside that portrait, that headshot, that business meeting environment also from a photographic standpoint. So yes, I am in fact doing that also. So I appreciate your feedback on that. Appreciate your feedback on those portraits, Leanna. I was happy with the results that came out of them. I think they tell the story of, from a picture standpoint, what I look like, who I am. So yeah, and I like using, as you can tell from those photos, you get this variation in the lighting and so forth, and I really enjoy that particular aspect of it. Trying to bring out the character and using lighting to do so, which is what photography calls for.
I love hats.
And I love hats. I do. As you might guess, this is the one that I have on now is one of my favorite hats. I get lots of compliments on this particular hat, and I've got probably 8 of them in all total. But people seem to see something in this one. Maybe they see the same thing that I did, when I bought it. So I do love hats, though. I do love hats. I've got several of them. I've got some for the winter. I've got some for the summer. I think they're great. I think they're great. I like fashion. I do like dressing up. I like what clothes can do for you. So yeah, I like my hats. Yeah, I like them. And it's a little bit, you would think with my height, and I'll mention this, I'm 6'7", so I'm pretty tall. And then I add another a hat onto it, which adds about another 5 inches or so. So but quite frankly though, I don't mind that. I'm not self-conscious about that because I'm more interested in the hat and how it looks, and yeah, it probably makes me look taller, but and more conspicuous. But I like them though. I do like them.
Before we wrap up, I was wondering if you have a message for the viewers to discover your art, to visit your website, to come to your shows.
Well, that's great. Well, thank you for that opportunity. Yeah, there are the primary way right now, I think, for the visitors, the quickest way would be to visit the website, which is www.sladeimages.com. That's where you'll find, the examples of my work. You'll be able to see the variety, how eclectic it is. And what I tend to do at the website when there's an event, a display, right? I put those in the notes in the about field on the website, so it's the other way of letting folks know what's going on. I've just begun to use Instagram. So I don't really know it cold, so I'm starting to get familiar with that because that's a great tool, great way to get it out, get that work out there. But that's a bit of a newbie for me. There's a couple of places in Aurora, in fact, that sell my work, and you would be able to find them on the internet. There's a place called the Cotton Seed Exchange in Aurora, Illinois. They carry my work. There's a location, it's the Aurora Historical Society in downtown Aurora, which also carries some select pieces of mine, mostly pieces that are associated with the town of Aurora itself. The Cotton Seed, for example, they carry a variety of pieces. The Historical Society is much more focused on the Aurora specifically. And again through my website. So thanks for the opportunity to let folks know about that. I'd like for folks to come to the website for sure. I'd like to get comments and feedback. You can email me via the website, and I certainly look forward to that. I certainly look forward to having the opportunity to answer any questions that you may have. And I will close by saying this. There is I can't quote this exactly, but the gist of the following words are words that I live by, and they go something like this. It's do what you can while you can with what you have, and that's my philosophy.